believe in God.
Every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all-powerful, very typical, and all good. And I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all-powerful or not all good.
Yeah, loving that intro. I've never seen that one before. Ha! Seen it a few times. Ad nauseum. G'day and welcome to this episode of An Atheist, a Believer, and a Pastor Walk Into a Bar. I'm your host, Peter Rowe. Thanks for your company. Sorry again about the late start. We're having more technical difficulties. I think we've ironed them out, at least if you can see us on YouTube right now. It is working. Wednesday night, the 11th of December, 2024, just gone 8 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time, broadcasting from Perth, Western Australia. Very hot Perth, Western Australia, depending on where you are in the world. It's 40 degrees today. That's Celsius too, by the way, not Fahrenheit. So it's been a real absolute stinker. We are broadcasting from Perth live on YouTube. Great to have your company. Tonight's episode is almost exactly 1 year since we kicked off this podcast, believe it or not. Back then it was called Beyond Belief, Making the Invisible Visible. My daughter Ellie came up with the current name of An Atheist, a Believer, and a Pastor Walk Into a Bar a year ago. Can you believe that? Incredible. So here we are. And Suresh is going to join us shortly too. He's having a birthday today. We'll wish him a happy birthday when he comes along. Yes, our first ever episode was on the 7th of December, 2023. Incredible. So it's pretty darn near impossible to talk about belief without talking about good and evil, black versus white, good guy versus bad guy. Star Wars is a classic example of white against black, and of course, they won. The official definition of evil is actually quite tame. Evil is to be profoundly immoral and wicked. So that lowers the bar somewhat, doesn't it? What is it exactly that determines someone being thought of as evil? There's the obvious ultimate example, of course, of Adolf Hitler, and there's been plenty before and after him, just not to the same degree. Jason actually asked this question on a couple of weeks ago on our podcast. On there, he asked, what is evil? Not talking about the biblical description of evil, but rather asking, what is it to be evil? Is it just selfishness? Are atheists evil by definition? I'll add one more. At what point do you cross over from being a bit of a dick to being considered evil? Good question, Jace. It's inspired tonight's podcast. We all do bad things. In fact, according to the Bible, we cannot not do bad things. In that case, why does the devil get such a bad rap? He's just being evil like the rest of us, isn't he? Does that mean he could ask forgiveness? What constitutes being considered evil? And who gets to make that call? So the author of everything evil allegedly is the devil with the permission from God. Is there more or less evidence for the existence of Satan compared to God? Have you ever experienced the existence of demons, for example? Have you seen one? Or are they just a figment of our powerful imagination? Why do so many Christians believe that demons walk among us and influence our lives? Why do Christians believe that the world is under the authority of Satan, running wild until Jesus comes back? And why on earth would a God of love allow such a farcical thing to happen? How bad do you have to be evil? Is Donald Trump evil? Many people consider he is very evil, but in what way? Is it just because he doesn't seem to give a hoot about anyone except himself? Is that evil? So tonight's subject for discussion, who gets to make the call on whether you're evil or not? Profoundly immoral and wicked. These are some of the words associated with it. Bad, damaging, detrimental, harmful, hurtful, mischievous, cruel, noxious, pernicious, wicked. On the panel tonight is Jace, the creator, the man who does things like there's smoke and mirrors everywhere. We never know where he is and who he is and where he is. Luke is with us as well, and Suresh along shortly. Welcome, gents. Jason, you started all this. What say you about evil?
It is an interesting question. And I think we have to differentiate first between conscious evil and unconscious evil, or deliberate evil versus, I get malevolent evil, if you want, versus evil that is just an innate characteristic of something. So you might ask the question, is a crocodile evil because it has the intent of killing you and eating you? Is that evil per se, as opposed to a human being who can make a decision as to whether or not their behavior has an adverse effect on somebody else? So I guess really it comes down to, we've got to define the word before we can, and agree on that before we can actually start arguing about what is evil and what isn't, or who is evil and who isn't. One of the questions I've got, though, and I really should ask it further into the show, but I want particularly Luke to start pondering on this one now. When we talk about the devil, as you've just said, and the devil possibly being evil as one of the definitions of it, but my understanding is that ultimately the devil is part of God, as far as I have learned. Like, God as an omnipotent being has the ability to get rid of the devil, you would assume, and if he can't get rid of the devil, then he's not omnipotent. So back to what Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying. So if the devil is part of God, does that mean evil is part of God? And if that's the case, does that mean that God is not all good? Boom!
Well,
Great
yeah,
questions.
they are great questions. And of course, for those who perhaps haven't studied it at all, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. And of course, the story of Satan, and Luke will correct me if I'm wrong, it was an angel of music called Lucifer. It was a beautiful angel. And for some unknown reason, and correct me if this is not the story, I don't know whether you think it's true or not, Luke, but Lucifer was jealous of God's power and authority and omnipotence, and decided to have a bit of a sad, and so was born as God cast him down to earth and turned into a snake. We call him Satan. Is that pretty much the story?
There's well, it's a story, but that's all it is. It's a story.
I'm just educating for people who didn't know why Satan came into being, and you can elaborate if you like on why then Jesus gave Satan the authority over earth and stuff. That would be helpful, I think. So,
yeah, I mean, look, there is so much here to go into, and it's all a work in progress for me as well. This is something that I think the second that I feel that I've arrived somewhere and I've got it all figured out, count me out. I'm cactus. Yeah, I think true, and I think that's part of any faith. Certainly, the Christian faith is a lifetime of wrestling and evolving and changing, kind of working through things. This is a big one to work through. Early days, it was very simplistic. My understanding of it was not far off how you described it, Rowie, which there are a few things in the intro there around, what the Bible says that might be not the full picture, because the Bible says a lot of things, like that story that you're talking about there about the Satan being cast down and Lucifer and all that sort of stuff. But it also, that's not the full picture. There are other stories, and there's meaning wrapped up in these stories. They're often not meant to be taken literally in many cases, and I believe that's certainly one of them. So for me, this idea that Satan is this opposing force that is a personalized force, as in like an entity. Yeah, like how we would imagine God, but kind of the opposite. Light, dark, good, evil. Well, if we have this idea, this anthropomorphized idea of God as this being, well, naturally, we're going to get to this point where we're anthropomorphizing the opposite of what God is. This first happened in Zoroastrianism in the Persian Empire. So the Persian religion, their faith was Zoroastrianism, and that's very much this dualistic good versus evil That's why prior to that stage in the Old Testament, you actually there's none of that. There's none of that real picture. There's many different ideas of Satan. A classic one is in the book of Job, where it's literally like Satan is with God. He is, so they're kind of, he's working for God, and he's like, oh, well, let me show you this. And so he's like a prosecuting attorney trying to prove something against God. But they're in it kind of together, But it's a story. This is not meant to be saying, oh, that's how this operates. There's a deeper truth to that. And for a long time, and there's certain areas of the Bible where you see Satan as an angel of destruction on God's behalf. It's like God doesn't want to get his hands dirty, so he'll send Satan to kind of do it for him. Again, it's this progressive understanding from an ancient people trying to make sense of, there is a God who is a creator, who we believe is good, and there is crap in the world. There is violence, there is death, there is destruction. So how do we do that? If everything comes from God, there must be a reason, and they wrestle with this, and we see that reflected in the Bible. That's why the Bible says many different and conflicting things, because there were people living at different points of time, coming to a different conclusion on what was going on with this sort of stuff. But again, post the Persian Empire, that's where this dualistic idea of good versus evil, God and Satan being like this actual entity, kind of really came to the fore. But again, and I think I'll elaborate later on my own thoughts around what this is. But it's it's something that we've sort of created this concept of, but it's certainly, I don't think that's the case. But there's sort of question marks around it. I'm not saying that evil doesn't exist. It clearly does. And I think it's a great discussion. But God being responsible for that evil, I don't believe so. I believe evil is is a very human, it's in the human realm, not the divine realm, which leads to its own questions as well.
Well, a stranger to our shores has appeared.
It looks familiar.
Birthday boy, Suresh, happy birthday first up, mate.
Oh, thank you. Actually, yeah, it was. I finally made it to pension age, 65. Finally got there.
No.
It was 40. I was going to say life begins at 40, mate.
I was going to say, yeah. It's all that beef tallow you've been putting on.
Yeah.
The beef tallow, the moisturizer.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
Do you know what shits me more than all of that is that I'm actually older than this young gentleman sitting there on this screen. I know what you're thinking. I want to find out what his secret is too, because clearly there's, something's going on, mate. Great to see you back with us. I know you've been dealing with some issues, which sounds like you're pretty much on top of. It's true. You do actually have a heart, which is nice to know, but it needed a little bit of a tune-up.
Yes, I've got this wonderful device that it's a little mobile phone that's tucked into my chest here, and it's got 3 wires going into my heart, and it keeps the heart going every time I feel, well, every time that the heart rate falls out of sync, it just sends a couple of electrical impulses. So it's got this rather lumpy little thing here that's sitting there.
Oh no!
Wow.
Sitting under my
You're
chest.
never going to get through customs easily again. You know that.
Oh, mate. I'm not even allowed to go through security. I've got to have a pat down, and I've got to carry a card that says I'm not even allowed to put my mobile phone in my pocket because
interfere with it.
Yeah.
So when you go on to flights, often they do mention about please turn off this device, that device, and certainly let them know if you have a pacemaker.
Yeah.
You've got to turn off the pacemaker until the plane gets to cruising altitude.
Well, so it's a combination of it was a pacemaker as well as a defibrillator. So it's actual defibrillator sits in your chest. You know, the ones you see usually in surf clubs and the like, sitting up there on the.
So literally, if you feel your heart starting to palpitate, you've got to shout out, "Clear! Everybody clear! I'm going to zap myself."
Yeah. I'd hate to think it's going to be interfering with navigation devices on a plane, though.
Take me to Mozambique. Well, we're already going there, so yeah. Well, look, mate, it's fabulous. Let's hope that the wonderful combination of technology and amazing doctors can keep it going. Yeah. Do you have to download the latest version like you do on your phone? Your pacemaker needs an update.
Yeah, just about there. You know, I've got to go in every few months, and they'll adjust the tolerance levels. They tell me, and that sets the bar at which it kicks in. So, and I've sort of thought about the whole religious angle to this. You know, is this sort of artificial, maintenance of life, or should we forget about all of this and just allow us to the hearts to stop when they're going to.
Well, perhaps they're just being punished for being a heathen.
Yeah.
So I want to get your angle on evil, particularly from even though for those watching who might assume that Suresh is a Hindu, he's not. He's non-practicing as far as that goes. But before I ask you about that, we've got a comment here from someone I'm not sure we've seen. Kevin Lips describing what exactly is evil is a very complex and perplexing subject. That's difficult because a lot of it is influenced by people's personal opinion and their experience. 100%, Kevin, and that's exactly how I've tried to present the podcast tonight. It's one of those things when you start talking about evil, every single solitary person you speak to will have an opinion, and it will differ greatly from everyone else's because it's kind of non-definable because it's so much a part of religion, a part of our lives, a part of history. And my question was at the beginning is who gets to call what is evil? What do you have to do to cross over from being a great person to maybe a not so great person into being someone considered evil? It's very complex, and as you say, very perplexing subject. So thanks, mate. If you've got any more light you can throw on it, we'd certainly love to hear what you think. Is there an essence of evil? So how does the Hindu view of evil differ from what we're talking about from a Christian perspective?
And I think that thinking along those lines, as you just outlined there, Pete, I did start to think in terms of what do people consider, and very much a personal view of where evil lies on the whole spectrum of man's activities, if you like. You know, what some people regard as evil, others may not. And I got into that area where, in certain parts of Hinduism, a significant part of religious doctrines and religious practices involve the offering of blood. And the process of drawing that blood, in my view, is quite evil, and it's quite an exercise in bringing pain to yourself and then offering that blood to the gods. And I keep thinking, surely that can't be sanctioned by a benevolent god of any kind. One of the classic examples is in the part of India where my parents come from. The Hinduism that's practiced there involves a a practice in our language. It's called reshaped. The reshaped is a person who goes into a trance because of the drumming of the beat of the drums all around him, and always a hymn. And at some point in that journey, then he starts to take a very, very long sword and strikes it on his head and draws blood. But supposedly he doesn't feel the pain, doesn't see. And to me, that was just such an evil exercise but his belief was that it was sanctioned by God to make that offering of blood to the God. And that's the part that I found really difficult to try and understand. I think in general, I could always use my own yardstick of measurement and say, I consider that activity evil, but this one, how is it evil? And can something like that be sanctioned by a benevolent God? Should it be even a part of religion? And yet, so much of our religion is based upon that penance, that need to do, to seek almost retribution for activities you've undertaken, and some of that retribution could be quite evil.
Yeah. Look, I think it's perfectly in line with Jehovah's Witnesses, for instance, disallowing a blood transfusion of a child, even though they might die. That, by anyone who doesn't subscribe to that religion, would have to consider that to be evil. Now, one thing I'm trying not to do, and that is to blame a God that I don't believe exists for everything that happens. Yes. Yeah, it's to me, God exists in our brains and in our minds, in our imagination, due to the fact that there is zero evidence to put up as an argument of why God exists. So I hear people bagging God about doing this, that, and the other, when really, who are you actually bagging out? Has God ordained Jehovah's Witnesses to refuse blood transfusions, even though it might result in a child's death? And does that mean that the parent that is making that decision on behalf of that child, is that evil? Are they playing God? It's complex, and we can go in all sorts of directions with this, but I want to invite people watching tonight live on YouTube to be a part of it, like Kevin did. If you'd like to jump on, question, comment, just let us know what you think about this subject. It's fascinating. It's one of those things you could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and actually probably not really unveil anything new.
But I mean, just think of that, and all of us would have read of that recent court case involving the young girl who was being starved.
Oh, yes.
How evil was that? That was just something that I couldn't get my mind around that. I just found that so I don't know, it's just mind-bogglingly evil. Yet she didn't see it as evil.
Now, that's one of the things that Jason was talking about at the beginning, that conscious evil and that unconscious or subconscious evil. They thought genuinely that they were doing the right thing. Now, they're either disillusioned, delusional, or whatever, but it appears that they weren't necessarily acting as evil people, as it were. They thought they had her best interest. Is that... And I don't know. I don't know whether they did or whether they're just complete psychopaths. I don't know. But that is as evil as you can imagine, doing that to an innocent child. Boggles the mind, doesn't it?
But does it... Sorry, that point then, the fact that they didn't see it as evil, does that justify it being undertaken? Otherwise, you've got to use someone else's definition of evil to cover.
Is it always subjective?
Yes.
And the question I asked before you popped along, Suresh, is a crocodile evil?
Yeah.
But if you ask my wife, damn straight they are.
A
They're as
mosquito.
evil as-
I mean, mosquitoes are responsible for more deaths globally than any other creature in history. So is a mosquito evil?
I think it's just unfortunate. I just think that its main source of prey just happens to be humans. If it was for another animal, it probably wouldn't matter. But yeah, look, I don't know how far to push the word evil. I don't know. You know, as I said before, the definition of evil is fairly innocent. It's not anything extreme. It's to be profoundly immoral and wicked. Well, there we go. We're probably all evil.
Oh, come on.
And it's just
Yeah.
a definition. Yeah, all
That is a
definitions.
definition. But
Yeah.
what about
Definitions? They're words. It's just and they're flexible. They change over time. You know, Derrida talks about words are inherently deconstructible, and
Yeah.
they are, because they rely to create a definition. You have to use words, and those words, you need to know the definition of those words.
and you've all
And
got
then
to
you-
agree on them?
It just exactly right. So definitions are one thing, but I think it just hearing you guys speak just then made me think of something. Yeah, and again, we could come up with the answer to what evil is, but it's still just going to be our thoughts on it. It's there's no sort of concrete thing, but I think awareness has to play into it, and I think differentiating, you can have a very evil act performed sometimes unwittingly by an individual who may not be an evil individual, but they've committed an evil act, you know, and that's where I think the awareness. So someone who is mentally ill, or someone who has a cognitive deficit, like a severe disability, who takes the life of another child, for example, but they have no idea what they're doing. Yeah, so they're not as culpable. The awareness, the act is evil, but it's not come from a thing. And I think you compare that to an adult male human who has an attraction to children, wrestles with it, and then chooses to act on that, and to do you know what I mean? That they're making a choice then with an awareness to perform something that could be, not only the act is evil, but then there's an evil intent, even if it stems from something that they struggle with or whatever. So I think, yeah, it's interesting. And that's why you can't look at a mosquito or a crocodile, because the awareness isn't, they're just surviving. You know, there's no.
So the interesting thing, Luke, following up on that, is you talked about intent. There's a word that describes this. So if there is an intent to do evil, that word is malevolence. Now, I mean, I was reasonably unaware of it, but to find that there is a specific word that is about conscious, deliberate, planned evil, that's someone who is malevolent, or they're demonstrating malevolence. So I'm adding that one to my little dictionary, because there's a lot of malevolent people out there.
That also, of course, relieves the crocodile of its guilt.
But then,
because a crocodile can't be malevolent, I would have thought.
Point and take it further about intent, does that then define everyone who is non-vegan as being evil?
Yes, okay, yeah, good, yeah.
I didn't kill the cow.
But it's not for survival.
Yeah,
No.
totally.
For my survival.
No, I think there are the further we go into this, what we will discover is that there are obvious, indisputable evils. There is no one could possibly have an argument against Adolf Hitler or Idi Amin or the Pol Pot or the thousands of evil people whose intent is evil. It's blowing up and burning down a mosque. That is an absolute act of evil by anyone's standards, whether you're a believer or religious or not. There are obvious evils that we can all identify and sit comfortably with. It's all the ones in between that we can't identify. And just for the record, sorry, just before you go, Suresh, your focus is all gone. Jason, you're not that young, good-looking bloke you were. It's as blurry as buggery, and it keeps freezing up. So I'm not sure what's happening.
It's a bit delayed.
Yeah, you're frozen at the moment.
So I get look the point I was going to make there, Pete, just in regard to what you were saying about what society defines as evil, and you're talking about some of those terror acts. I spent hours and hours during the early 2000s dealing with a number of people who were radicalized terrorists here in Australia, people who ultimately were Al-Qaeda members and so on. So I spent about 50 or 60 hours with Jack Roche, who was the first terrorist over in Hickey prison, and to hear him justify those acts that were perpetrated in the name of pushing back against Western imperialism and so on, you could see how someone who was of that view would actually justify it. And so it's not that clear definition to say acts of terror are automatically regarded as evil. No, one man's terrorism is another man's patriotism.
Absolutely, yeah, yep.
Especially if you think you're fighting evil, like in your heart, you're genuinely thinking you're doing the right thing. You're defending the world. You're defending values against someone who is clearly evil to you.
And then the intent comes in there, and that's a different. That puts a whole different complexion on it. Is it evil because my intent was the survival of my community, or whatever it was? Yeah.
So if we take a leaf out of what Luke was saying about pedophiles, or people that fiddle with kids, if I've got an issue with those people and I know there's a meeting of pedophiles happening just down the road, and I go down there with a gun and I blow them all away, is that evil?
Oh, yeah.
That's a very good question, and I would challenge anyone to dare to actually try and put that in a little compartment that we can all understand, because there are so many arguments from all sorts of directions. The natural response straight away is, of course it's evil.
Yeah.
But then we allow nations like Singapore and Indonesia to kill people who bring in drugs.
Yeah.
Is that state-sanctioned evil?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it evil to incarcerate people for life?
Yeah. So should we?
I think there's
struggled even when Saddam Hussein was killed. We know the man was a tyrant, but he was killed. He was murdered.
Yep.
That's when it becomes a matter of opinion, isn't it? His family? No, of course they wouldn't have thought it was evil. People who he had tortured and killed, and families of them, of course they would understand that it was evil. His children, whoever knew him and loved him for whatever reason, would not think that was evil. It's such a difficult thing to put your finger on. It's difficult to come up with an evil that everyone can agree with. And the only way we can do that, to a degree, because there's no doubt there's people in history who don't believe Adolf Hitler was evil. There's people who don't even believe he did anything wrong. So it's so subjective, and it's so difficult to actually nail down. But I just want to, before we get too many more questions coming in from Kevin, got a few more remarks. Another factor we have to consider in life is that everything is a trade-off. For example, I may help a person in need, but then they need that experience to progress. I understand. Inevitably, that person could wind up dying over an overdose, such as a homeless person has a drug addiction. However, helping them may get them out of the situation to overcome that evil, in a sense. Good points, right? And throughout different traditions, you have different perspectives. For example, the Hindu cultures were mentioned, and it's more about ignorance than evil itself that causes people to do the wrong things. Thanks, Kevin, for those remarks. I'll leave it with the guys and see whether they want to comment. Just a quick one thrown in from Hoey Tube. These are two. I don't know if we've had Kevin before, maybe a long time ago. I haven't heard from Hoey Tube, who has a speedometer with a maximum of 120 Ks on it, done 33,004 Ks. Interesting. We do not repay evil with evil. We do not repay evil with evil.
Wise words, YouTube.
I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that, Huey Tube, if you can. Just expand a little bit on what you mean by that. Is that an impossibility? Is that an opinion? Just give us something back.
But you counter that by saying any time that we take a life as part of a capital punishment regime, we are evil with evil.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether there's any exceptions to that statement.
I think that very question there, Rowie. Yeah, are there any exceptions? That's the game that humanity has been playing for as long as we've existed, and I think we get pulled into the trap of trying to define evil and evil acts, and it's necessary for society, for the law, and to have a code of conduct, and that is these acts are acceptable and these acts are unacceptable. There's a lot of nuance and all that sort of stuff, and we never fully get it right. But I'm not saying that in itself is a problem. But what I believe that the most important thing that human beings can do, and this is where I see Jesus come into it, is trying to pull back from that to identify the root causes of what's going on. So instead of looking at what's an evil act and who's an evil person, look at the factors. What are the common factors that drive that inclination to act evil that some people may act on and others may repress and others may not even feel if they're particularly lucky? But most of us have some sort of thing in us that the majority of us will not act on, but some do. And this is the thing. When we start to look at those things, I believe one of them, and I can elaborate on many of them, but I think one of them very much is violence. And that's why I'm an ardent opponent to the death penalty. And that's where I agreed the whole repaying evil with evil, because I don't think it just continues the merry-go-round. It never ends. In fact, you end up, there's always some sort of flow-on effect that just keeps amplifying. And you see that in the myth in Genesis, where it talks about Cain going off and building a city. Like he kills his brother Abel, and then next thing you know, you just see over the course of a couple of generations, in like a paragraph, violence just escalates to the point where all of a sudden it's just bedlam. And that's very much a myth that's meant to depict what happens with humans in communities when we let violence take hold. That's why it cannot be the answer to end violence. It's like fire putting out fire. It doesn't. It's just
which is why wars are such a complete and utter.
No one wins a war.
No,
you just get two losers.
Take a point. When I was thinking about this whole thing, I actually broke evil up into two parts and defined it in terms of my own personal choice of things I regard as evil and things I do not regard as evil, and then what I regarded as societal norms. And those societal norms are ultimately culturally and religiously based. And biased culturally and religiously. Different cultures will regard certain acts as not necessarily evil. And that's when you transplant somebody from one culture into another with the definition of evil that he or she brings with them from their culture into a different culture. And you find the clash that then comes about, where societal norms, they get violated. This societal norms as opposed to the ones they came from.
Yeah.
Should it not be almost a universal human right around things like bodily autonomy? Like, regardless of culture or religion, the individual universally should have a right to their own condition, their own autonomy is the right word for it. And I'll give you one example of that perhaps sets the cat amongst the pigeons just a little bit. And it's one that's been a pet concern of mine for a long time. And certainly when my son was born, you'll know where I'm going now, I was making the issue over and over and over again at the hospital to make sure that this was not done. Circumcision.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, you're talking about a young boy that should be able to make his own decision about anything like that. But instead, well-meaning parents, or perhaps just because of religion, go and chop a piece off a person's body. And I'm kind of like, to me, that's inherently evil. But they're doing it for what they believe to be the correct and appropriate religious reasons.
Yeah, look, that's an ongoing, never-ending debate. It's kind of one of those things that we talk about quite often, is the influences of religion against normal moral standards and thinking of society and how we do things because of religion, when normally a normal, sane person, if analysed and looked at it honestly, would say, well, no, what the hell? Why?
If you take that example, Jason, and also look at the example of what is prescribed in the Quran, for example, with the Muslims, and the need for retribution. So if there is an act of robbery, then you could have your arms or whatever chopped off, which would be considered to be completely evil in other cultures and societies. So that's where I come back to that societal norm that we have established in each based on our cultural upbringing as to what is acceptable and what is evil. And that is so culturally dependent and religiously dependent. They don't easily transplant from one culture to another.
I do hear you on that, Suresh, but I mean, we're talking about someone in this instance who is a part of that culture and who understands if they commit an act, then the retribution may well be there, which is very different to the act of perpetrating an act against something or someone that is completely innocent. But then, they just have to have been born into that culture. They've never done anything wrong, and the next thing they're having their bits snipped off. And draw a comparison then to female genital mutilation, which we're all up in arms against.
Yeah, but it's so acceptable to almost every child in America is circumcised. It's just the norm there. For various reasons, they consider it very appropriate for health reasons. Yeah, you'll never convince me of that, but it's still, nevertheless, it's something that in their culture it's completely acceptable.
I want to talk about geographical differences too, because that's huge when it comes to evil, any kind of evil on any level. The difference between what's acceptable in some countries like Syria or what they experience on a daily basis, we are just absolutely shocked beyond belief because we're not subjected to those kind of evils in Australia. Our evils are very different than the rest of the world. But I'll get to them. But this is what I was kind of alluding to when Hui Tube was talking about the comment he made about evil. With evil, it's from 1 Peter 3:9 in the Christian Bible. We hurt our own soul by repaying evil with evil. I was wondering whether that was going to be a biblical precedent. That's okay. That's fine and dandy. That's what the show is all about. You say normal moral standards. Now, this is a good one. Where did those standards come from? You have to ask yourself that. It's absolutely true. It's an easy target. Saying normal moral standards and how does and as I mentioned in the beginning, who makes the call? Who's the person or the thing or whatever that comes with the saying I can tell you, Pete.
I can tell you because we've discussed it week on week on week. We know what the answer is. It's our one commandment.
Don't be a dick.
Right. It all comes down to that. Because if you're being a dick, you're being evil. That's the bottom line. You're interfering with someone else. You're upsetting someone else. You're offending someone else. All of that's evil.
Can't you be a dick without being evil? I mean, evil to me is
shades of grey.
It's something that it's easily definable. Just quickly before, because Huey Tube has to go. Have a blessed day. Time for me to work. Pleasure listening to all of you. Let us know where you're from before you go, mate. Where are you? I say, mate. We call males and females in this country. If you're not familiar with our terminology in Australia, everyone's a mate. So don't be offended if we call you mate. But where are you? What country are you in? Love to have you. Enjoy your day at work. Don't work too hard. And thanks. Hopefully you can join us next Wednesday. But yeah, so the geographical thing. We in Australia have been sitting back in this lucky country watching horrendous evil since I was a kid, just way before I was a kid, but from when I was a kid seeing, we didn't have a lot of obviously vision of things that were happening in the rest of the world back then. But my God, with the internet and with the connection that we all have in the world, it's not hard to see rather where some of the horrendous evil lies in countries on a daily basis, children being burnt by chemical warfare in Syria. And it's like, it's so geographical. Our evil, I mean, you get someone like the, who's the kid that shot up everyone in Tasmania, the worst gun.
Martin Bryant.
Yeah, Bryant. I mean, no one's going to defend him. Maybe his mother saying, he's not really evil. Just because he killed however many people, I can't remember. But he has to be evil to have done that. That is an indefensible argument about evil. So that's for us is as bad as it gets. And things like that only happen, every now and then. We don't witness evil to that extent in our country hardly ever. Mm. But it happens on a daily basis.
What about Luke's argument, though, Pete, that if you're cognitively damaged, if you're mentally unbalanced, it wasn't malevolence per se, because he didn't necessarily know what he was doing or the consequences of his actions.
Mm. Mm. Okay, is this possible that you can actually separate the act from the person in the sense that a gun was used by a human to kill people? Can you not isolate that and saying that is an evil act? Who did it? Okay, this guy is not with it. He's not sane. He's obviously not with it. Does that nullify or remove the evil act of killing people?
Not the act.
One of the hallmarks of intelligence is nuance, knowing that there are shades of grey in everything.
Yeah, of course.
That's where I think differentiating between an evil act and an evil person. And for me, I live with the belief that there are people who do very evil things, and there are people who do intentionally malevolent evil things. So they're not just
cruel.
Cruel, yeah. And yet I cannot come to the point of believing that there are individuals who are irredeemably pure evil, as in like there is no humanity left in them somewhere. It may be buried deep down. They may never have even had a chance to come out. They may never see that humanity in this life. But at the same time, if I believe people are inherently good, and the doctrine of original sin is very, very flawed. That's not the Christian position. It is some Christian position. Yeah, it is. It is certainly some. But it's not. You don't find that in the Bible. You certainly don't see it in Jesus. It's certainly not the picture of God saying that babies are born inherently evil, and then they need to say a prayer one day in order to become good and be redeemed. No. Instead, what we see is that people are made in the image of God. But there is something that in saying that there's no original sin, there clearly is something that can corrupt humanity. There are inclinations that drive not just individuals, but groups of individuals, and then systems and communities. We see this especially clearly through the practice of scapegoating, whether we're scapegoating an individual or whether it's the scapegoating of a particular social group or race or sexual orientation or an entire ethnic. So we see this all the time. But there are things in us that can be quite corrupting, I believe. That they're not put there by God, but it's the desire for power, the desire that leads us to have conflict with one another in order to get one step ahead, the desire for retributive justice, which isn't really a form of justice because no one feels better when they kill the person who killed their family member, or it's like you think you're going to, but you don't. No one feels better when someone's executed, all this sort of stuff. It just keeps escalating and it gets worse and worse and worse, and we end up in all sorts of stuff. So what I'm saying is I believe there are acts that are evil, there are people that commit evil acts, but the idea of evil individuals, irredeemably evil individuals, I think it's a slippery slope. Once we ascend to that, all of a sudden then it's, well, you can do whatever you want with those sort of individuals. They can be killed. They can be, because all this, it's nothing but good can come from that. And yet that cannot be the case. I
think one of the tricky areas, the grey areas, Luke, that you mentioned about, and the character of Jesus, one would assume there is no evil, certainly from the portrayal of the character of Jesus, there doesn't seem to be any evil. But what's interesting is that people try and emulate Jesus knowing full well that it's impossible. There is no living human being that could possibly emulate the character of Jesus. How could they? They're just people. He was actually the Son of God, and I'm talking about the story about this. So how do you not be evil if you can't emulate the person that you admire as the greatest? How do you can only fail. And
true, but if you're right, but if you spend a life attempting to emulate that, you're going to fail in the end, sure, because we're human. I think Jesus takes the pressure off that from the outset by saying, that the whole forgiveness, all of that sort of stuff, it's effectively saying, I get it. This is not easy. This is not going to be something that you're going to get right all the time. So it's okay. Don't worry. I love you. The Father loves you. All that sort of stuff.
There's nothing wrong with aspiring to that. I mean, we should all shoot for that. But as a good example of this, you talk about original sin, right? When we're born and when we first develop, we are inherently selfish. It's all about us and ourselves. And you see it in babies, you see it in toddlers, you see it in small children, you see it in people who haven't developed particularly well emotionally and socially, even as they continue to become an adult. There are a lot of adults that haven't developed the social skills that give them empathy. And I think if we're on a number line from baby, selfish, to the story of Jesus and how he was, all about forgiveness and empathy and compassion and all that stuff, we all sit somewhere along that number line. And if the aspiration is to try and follow in the footsteps of that man, that Son of God, then great, we're all shooting for something. But maybe that's a closer definition of evil, to say it's primarily about selfishness and a lack of empathy. And the acts you commit as a result of that is what makes for evil.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think evil is something, and there is even a stream in Judaism that talks about evil not being this divine wrestle between two forces, but in fact it being something that is internal. They called it the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Hatov. You might have heard of the evil eye. People, yeah, that's sort of common vernacular. That's what that is, right? It's this idea that you can live out of an eye of light or out of the evil eye, and that's kind of how you view things, how you pursue things. If there's any practitioners of Judaism listening, I've probably butchered it, and feel free to harass me in the comments. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it is. But what I like about that is it's saying this is something within us. I think that just touching back on the Jesus thing I think where we get so wrapped up, and many Christians do, and many practitioners of Judaism, Second Temple Judaism at the time did as well, of being so sin conscious, of trying to be perfect and follow the law and do all of these different things. You end up having zero impact on the world around us. You end up justifying a whole bunch of stuff as long as you're okay, as long as you're clean, as long as you're pure, as long as you're not doing all this sort of stuff. But it's an impotent purity. It's an impotent cleanliness because you're actually not doing anything. And I've seen people that might be a bit rough around the edges. Many people who don't believe in God might be avowed atheists and yet spend their time on the margins with the poor and the oppressed. And you go, that's what it's about. Don't worry about what you believe. This is where you're at. And Jesus modeled that. And that's why he kind of butted up against the ones who were focusing on a holiness, a purity and a personal holiness. And he's actually interacting and saying, don't worry about becoming perfect. Just worry about the ones who are doing worse than you are and helping elevate them. You'll be okay. You know, that's what will happen. Don't worry about the violence of trying to take over the Roman Empire and do a violent overthrow so that we can get someone else sitting on a throne who's going to end up doing the same shit that they're doing in a different way. It's going to be the same horse, different jockey, I'm telling you, and it happens. It happens all over the time. He's like, don't worry about that. Let's do this. And that's what I think is the key, because it's getting at evil at the root. It's saying, let's nip it in the bud of violence. Let's nip it in the bud of scapegoating, of the pursuit of power. That's why everything he does is upside down. It doesn't look like the kingdoms of the world, because he knows that the kingdoms of the world perpetuate that same shit over and over again, and it's the merry-go-round.
And speaking of horse and jockey, I think horse racing is evil.
Yeah, me too.
Exploitative of. Okay, good. We agree on that one. That's cool. I've got a couple of things on here. One is just a bunch of hands that are in prayer from AB. Thank you, AB. I'm not sure your intentions, but we appreciate your input. Followed up by Believe. Belief is the backbone of this entire podcast, and that's why it covers so many subjects, because it is something that is inherently almost a prerequisite to being a human, is to believe in something or believe in nothing. But either way, belief is the core of what we're talking about. So what is it that you believe in, AB? I take it, reading between the lines and the hands that are praying there, is that you are a believer. Of what description are you a believer? Are you a person of Christian origins? Are you Jewish? Who are you? Give us a bit of information about you. But thanks for being a part of what we're doing here. And a reminder too, I think everyone bar Jason and I have to disappear early tonight. I
got to go too.
Oh, that's right. There's everyone. So I'll just be by myself talking. And if you want me to continue on,
Shakespearean monologue.
It'll be completely unbiased, lacking in any evil intent whatsoever. It will be bloody hilarious. It will be fun.
Complete agreement.
What?
Award-winning stuff.
Unity of one.
Unity of one. Absolutely. So that's going to happen, well, around about 5 or 6 minutes, according to my clock. We are in Perth, Western Australia, and it is 9:25 p.m. on Wednesday, the 11th of December. Great to have your company. Love to hear some more comments from people before we wrap it up, before these big girls' blouses go home at 9:30. Oh no, I got told off for saying that the other day.
What, big girls' blouse?
Yeah, it's a favourite Aussie saying of mine, but it is absolutely uncool in this day and
Which
age.
lady's handbag said that to you?
Oh,
There's a step.
Sorry.
There's a step that people
You're about to
take,
get
and they
cancelled,
see a
mate.
line in the sand, and Jason goes, "Stuff the line in the sand." I'm going right over top of it.
He loves
And
those
I'm gonna-
lines.
The problem
And then
is you need to
jumping
know what the
practice.
rules are to know which ones to break.
Well,
And if
see,
you can do it in a sensible way,
Yes. Well, interestingly, big girl's blouse is actually an English saying, which has got nothing to do with the big girl. It's actually, the origins are to do with the blouse. Now, Australians have adopted that to insult a bloke who doesn't want to do something hard by going, mate, you're just a big girl's blouse. How that connects to someone who doesn't want to do anything, I've got no idea, but I got told off. If anyone is offended, tough
See,
shit.
your
No, I'm
understanding
joking.
of that,
If anyone is
when they
offended,
say
come
big
back,
girls'
please.
blouse, when they say big girls' blouse, they're not talking about a big girl. They're talking about an adult girl, right? Because
Yeah,
that's my understanding of it.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
an
I got-
adult
They're
girl.
talking about a girl's blouse, and they're saying you're a big one.
Yeah,
It's not like
that's
a
right.
big
But it's
girl.
not referring to someone's weight or bodily structure. No.
No. It's interesting how it's used as a look. Any kind of comical insult to someone using parts or anatomy or sex of another person today is deemed uncool. I get it,
Yeah.
and all I'm interested in is whether or not it offended someone. I don't say it to be it, but my wife picked me up. She said, "Is that? I'm not sure you should be saying that." And lo and behold, someone said on Facebook they chewed me out for calling someone a big girl's blouse because they misconstrued why I said it, who said it, for what reason, and whatever. But it doesn't matter. So if I offended
So is it
anyone, I'm sorry.
uncool to call someone a pansy?
Yeah.
Right. Because what does pansy mean?
it's a
I mean,
flower.
not what we mean by it, but what does it mean?
Well, a pansy's a flower.
Right.
So you're insinuating that someone is soft and weak and possibly
Delicate.
not delicate, not
Delicate.
straight, perhaps gay.
Oh, I didn't know it had those in that. No, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Pansy was used as a word back in the day to insult people who may or may not have been effeminate in some way. You're big pansy. You're a big girl. You're a
Right.
big girl's blouse. It's a derogatory insult.
I've heard it
for
as a
sure.
sledge in sports, but I never kind of,
Oh,
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, look. Yeah. Most people say things that we've just grown up with them, and then suddenly you think that's not really a nice thing.
Why don't we stick with things that come out of the toolbox? Because I know, like, my dad used to occasionally refer to me as being a spanner.
Yeah.
Spanner's good.
Yeah.
Spanner's good. Yeah. Left-handed spanner.
Right. And all the old ones, like saying someone's got a few roos loose in the top paddock and that kind of thing. I mean, I like that one because that one isn't derogatory to any particular type of person.
No,
That's just someone who's not
just the one
overly
you're saying
bright.
it to.
We
that's
talk
right.
about it. We talk about our dog not being the sharpest tool in the shed. I mean, he's not,
Right.
he's not lighting up the sky with brightness. So
Couple of
and
snags
listen,
short of a bar.
before we wrap it up, I want to go around all of us what you would consider historically to be the country that you would think would be the most evil for whatever reason, whether it's mass
Are you
killing.
about to alienate our global audience?
That the intent, no. and present company accepted for wherever you may be living in at the moment. Obviously not the people who are involved in the podcast, but there are countries who are inherently not. Well, when you bring politics into it, it's a kind of a different argument because I think politicians have the ability to create an enormous amount of evil within what they're doing. I think Peter Dutton's doing a great example of that now, copying what Trump did in order to get the presidency, and he's putting out stuff which is dividing of our nation. And is that evil?
It's an ancient playbook.
Of course it is. And the amount of people who spend time analyzing these things to get to the bottom of it, to have the most impact. All they're interested in is power and money. What gets me in? I don't give a stuff how I do it. I don't care how honest it is. What gets me in? That's Trump's hymn book, always has been. And it's sad to see it happening in this country. Suresh, before you disappear, what would be your thoughts on some of the things that you have seen around the world which have just been classically evil?
Oh,
You're on mute.
You're muted.
Can't hear you.
We can't hear you. You must be on mute. Just give your defibrillator a bit of a tickle.
Hang on, I'll press the button.
Can't hear you.
No, gone altogether, mate.
He's off mute.
Draw the shape of the country.
Do it in Auslan.
Why is it suddenly gone quiet? I wonder.
No, maybe he's lost his voice.
Try changing your the input and the settings, the mic, just to something else, and then back again.
While he's finding it, I'll just quickly mention mine because I've got a jet in a second. I'm not talking about a country at a particular point in time because I think a lot of countries have been evil at particular points in time. The one that I think has been evil for the longest in modern history is England and its imperialist tendencies.
Whoa.
Empire.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, they did have a fixation with ownership and taking what they wanted. And then that's a great point, actually, Jace, because England, the United Kingdom, would never have been seen by people as being evil when there's so many other evil countries around. I mean, what Putin's doing in Russia at the moment, he's an evil dictator, you know. Xi Jinping and you know, anywhere in Korea, North Korea, actually not South Korea, that's not fair, North Korea. But yeah, so Rach, have we got you back again, have we? Or can we hear you? No. That's really weird.
It's government censorship.
I don't know what's happened, Suresh. I don't know what. I can try and remove you and then bring you back in.
It's evil that the man doesn't have a voice.
He's turned himself off.
He might rejoin.
Jace, your face has been completely blurred all night. You were so good when you first came on air.
I'm a shapeshifter.
Yeah, it's weird. Something's happened with your network. I mean, you look
I
better.
did drop the resolution because
definitely.
it was freezing.
Well, you got it on 7.
Yeah, on potato.
1080, nah. 720, nah. Let's just try 7.
I don't know what's wrong with my thing tonight. I always seem to be looking over there. And I'm not looking over there. I'm looking at you guys, and I'm still, I don't know.
I've just increased the resolution again. I don't know if it helps.
Tiny bit.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Jace, about your comment, what I like about it is it's easy to go North Korea, like some of these real obvious acts of evil, or, you know, World War II Germany and some of these sort of things. And you go,
moments. Yeah,
because it's just so, it's just on the surface, it's very clear, right? But imperialism, and Rowie mentioned it, how most people wouldn't view that as evil, and that's actually the most insidious evil. Is the fact that empire has become so ingrained in what's acceptable, the conquering and ownership of nations, and obviously it's done much more subtly these days than it was in the early days. But you know, this idea of empire and colonialism and things like that has become just like, oh yeah, it's normal, like that's okay. That's how countries are supposed to work. That's how the global community is supposed to operate. It's like, no, it's not. But that's
I've heard that saying.
Told that that's how it is, and that's the worst evil of all because it's accepted.
You kill one person, you're a murderer. You kill 10 people, you're a psychopath. You kill 1 million people, you're a conqueror.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
I
100%.
personally, I think, for what it's worth, to me, the most evil country, and it's certainly not of the same age as other countries which would be deemed to be evil, but I think the US are by far the most evil country in the world, in the sense that they have been involved in more wars, in supply of more weapons, have done so many unbelievably cruel, selfish things that I've witnessed in my life, with so many countries in the world. They are absolutely, and if you're listening and you're in the States, I'm sorry, but that's the reality for me.
They're defending democracy, Pete. That's their argument.
Yeah. Yep. In a country that doesn't want it or doesn't need it and didn't ask for it, but you're going to get it anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're just the latest in a long list of empires, super empires. Yeah. It's from the Greeks to the Romans to the States and the Babylonians and the Persians. And it's just, this is, and obviously the British Empire.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. It becomes insidious, and that is the greatest evil. For me, it cannot be a single country, because each of the leaders of the countries that operate in this way they're operating out of that same mechanism, that scapegoating mechanism. And I think this conversation is so important that it's got to be a two-parter, because we haven't scratched the surface of this. But my last sort of comment will be just laying that seed of, I'm very heavily influenced by the French anthropologist René Girard and his understanding of human behavior, and his idea of mimetic desire being the root of all of this stuff. So this idea that desire is not something that we actually have, that we think, I desire this because I want it. We actually don't. We desire it because we've seen someone else desires that, and we want how that's going to make them feel. We think that's, and all of a sudden, that's why you put two, toddlers, and there's a whole bunch of toys, and the one that's the toddler's playing with a toy, the other one's going to want to play with that toy. It's not about the toy; it's about so desire is mimetic, and it creates conflict, and then it builds and builds to the point where the cathartic release of that comes through the expulsion of a scapegoat, and this amplifies and amplifies, and that's why we end up scapegoating. That's why Trump's tactics of dividing people but providing scapegoats as the answer. This is the enemy. This is the problem. It gives people a focus to unifies people, and it brings a cathartic release when they're taken down.
Yeah,
but it's actually not a true peace. It's just temporary because it just keeps going. So I think that's something worth talking about, because that's the genesis of war. It's the genesis of all violence, of everything, and the undoing of that is the beginning of the undoing of evil, because you can only participate in that when you don't realize what's actually happening.
And you mentioned something.
You realize it. Once no one scapegoats people going, I know that they're innocent, but I'm going to blame the Jews anyway, or I'm going to blame the gays anyway, or I'm going to blame black people anyway. No, in their mind, they think they're actually the problem or whatever. But when that's revealed to actually be completely untrue, that it's just you can't participate in that anymore. It just falls apart like a house of cards. And I think
it doesn't matter though, Luke. It doesn't matter, because people aren't about truth. They're about truthiness. It's not about the objective truth. It's about what feels true and right.
I agree.
That's the stump voter right there. Yeah.
Undoing it is not as simple as just saying, oh no, here are the statistics that actually what you're thinking is, that doesn't work. That's a whole other thing, which I think this is, for me, and obviously it's the end of the night, but Jesus and the cross and all of that is actually the undoing of a lot of that. But because you can't just speak it, it's got to be something that disrupts everything in order to actually change that. So it's interesting.
You said something earlier, Luke, about how it becomes the countries that have been doing the same thing, and that's, I guess, when I use America as an example, I'm talking about the enormity of the ability to impact because of the size and because of the ridiculous amount of money spent on propaganda and political bullshit, and how they just impact on so many countries. Exactly the same as the way that we see the evil countries, but they're doing the exact same thing. But that's okay. It's America, greatest country in the world.
Exactly.
It's America, and they've been doing it for so long that 99% of the people in America would have no idea about the arms that they have been sending to Iraq and Iran or Syria over the time. I'm just picking out numbers. I'm not saying that but they have just,
they'll get up and say, and they'll say, oh, you know, that's horrible what's happening over there. And then they've financed it.
Yeah.
You know, armed both factions, you know, but people don't know about that. It'll just
and it's also quite laughable that people don't realize that patriotism is the same thing as nationalism.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right.
Yeah. And there's
a lot more to be said.
And they send these poor innocent kids thinking they're doing the right thing for the great red, white, and blue, and they're just sending them off as cow fodder and just
someone else's kids. They're not sending their own kids. Someone else's kids.
And the one thing in common with all evil leaders throughout the world since time began is that none of them ever get off their ass and actually get involved in the wars that they create.
Don't get your hands dirty.
They do. Having said that, back in the day, if any of the films we saw made in Hollywood about Julius Caesar and stuff, you did see them actually involved in big sword fights and stuff. But by and large, they sit behind, and it's the same as going on around the world right now. Is that they don't have to do anything. They just send off their innocent people to kill more innocent people, and to somehow think that their hands are clean and there's no blood on them. And look, by and large, I would suggest that Earth is probably full of lots of evil right across the board for all sorts of reasons. It's an evil place. And a lot of the radical Christians would go, oh, that's because Satan's in control and he's making it bad. But wait till Jesus comes back, going, you're living in a dream world.
A total abdication of responsibility.
Correct.
This is the problem with externalizing evil to the realm of up there as some divine good and bad battle. Is that so beyond us as humans to participate in, that the best we can come up with is praying against it and trying to cast a demon out here or there and declaring whatever over our family and stuff. It's like, if you want to do all that stuff, that's great. But you also then cannot participate in deconstructing the evil systems and
that's right.
and things around us that, as a human being, as a citizen of the world, we can participate in ending. We can be vocal. We can try and change things. It may be a futile effort. It's a big machine. All that. I get that, but at the same time, a life spent trying to do that by taking responsibility of not just managing the evil that we struggle with, but identifying and speaking out against the evil we see around us is far better than waiting for God to come down and sort it all out one day.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. My parting comment, Luke, you were bang on. It doesn't matter if you're a tiny cog in a big system. Look at a really nice Swiss chronometer, right? Full of tiny little cogs, and every single one of them matters, because without one of those cogs, it doesn't tell the right time. Crucial. Be a tiny cog. Make a difference. I'm going to go and eat my Turkish delight. Turkish delight.
Yeah, I got to go too. Love you, gents.
Love your work, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Just check yourselves out. I'll stick around for a bit and just talk to Exod. Here's another new person to our podcast, Exod.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Good on you, Luke. Cheers, mate. And then, then there was one. Exod. Let's have a look at what Exod has to say. The entire universe is volatile. Is it the entire universe is volatile? You have no proof that there is or is not a God. You have no proof there is not aliens. What you have shown proof of ignorance. Okay, number of statements there to unpack. You have no proof that there is or is not a God. Never tried to. I cannot, nor can anyone. We've agreed from that on this podcast right from the beginning that whether you're an atheist or whether you're a believer, both are unprovable. I have never, ever tried to disprove that there is a God. Sorry, that there isn't a God, nor did I try and prove that there was a God when I was a believer. You have no proof that there is not aliens. No, I don't know where you're getting this from, Exod. We haven't made any of those statements. I have no idea whether there are aliens or not. I've never spoken out about them not being a possibility or being a possibility. I would imagine with the amount of life giving planets around the world, around the universe, in other solar systems, that there is possibly aliens. Maybe they've already come and had a look and thought, yeah, there's no intelligent life here, and they've buggered off. What you have shown, proof of ignorance. Elaborate. That's a big call. Jump on and tell me more about Exod, how we have proven and shown ignorance. And to make a statement like the entire universe is volatile, I have no idea what you mean by that. Certainly the planet Earth is very volatile. How is the universe volatile, and what part of it? All of it? Some of it? Specifics, please. So normally we would go on, it's around about this time, maybe even 10 o'clock. Sometimes we've gone quarter past because people are continuing like a good self, making comments, so we stick around and have a talk about it. Normally there's about 2 or 3 of us. This is the first time. I started this podcast a year ago, almost to the day, after being a believer, and then discovering that there was no evidence that would convince me that there was a God after believing there was for 25 years as a Christian. And I figured there was people like me. So basically wanted to get on and have a podcast, and I joined up with my nephew-in-law, who's a Christian, as we both were together for a long, long time, and realized that we probably had more in common than we did not, in the sense that there are many things about atheism that Richard understands and agrees with, and likewise, I think we do have more in common than we have separating us. But here we are. We've grown through Luke, who was a pastor at the time, through Suresh, through Jace, to try and just add a sense of honesty, not coming up with answers, but asking questions. And the more questions we've asked, the more questions there are. I think it is absolutely fascinating to consider whether or not there is life on other planets, whether or not there are aliens. We've asked all of these questions, whether or not there is a God. I am still open to the possibility of anything. I've never once made a statement like angels don't exist, Satan doesn't exist. I have no idea. People claim all sorts of things. Spiritual claims about seeing ghosts and poltergeists and stuff. And I'm not about to bag those kind of people at all. How do I know? How do I know what's out there? Have I experienced everything that there is to experience? Of course I haven't. Therefore, I am open and I am learning. All I will ask for, and I think it's a fair question, is proof, is some degree of evidence. Show me. If you want to make a claim, show me why you've made that claim and how is it true. Because there are so many things we believe in when we're young, and if we get to a point where we decide that it was really just a belief in something really nice, something really good, but we actually have no evidence for it. And if someone's going to make a claim and they can't prove it, I'm not convinced. It's as simple as that. I've never made a statement that God doesn't exist. It feels to me like a God doesn't exist. It feels to me like God is just a belief we have in our brains, in our minds, in our imagination. because we can't externalize a God. You can only internalize. I can't see a God. I can't talk to a God. I can't meet a God. I can't see him doing anything. There's never been an appearance by God, as far as I'm aware, in the history of claims about the gods. Gods were created by people to explain what it is that we didn't know. And bit by bit, those gods that were represented, lightning, thunder, disease, whatever, have been replaced by science. Science is not my God. Atheism is not a worship of anything. I don't even call myself an atheist anymore, the same way as I don't call myself an a-leprechaunist. Do you know? I just want to believe in stuff that I can see, that's tangible, that I can understand. And it staggers me to think that people are willing to believe in something without any proof. We don't do that in anything else in life. But it seems fair game when it comes to God. Hello, kind of stream snipping, but hello. This one guy, what is stream snipping? I gather that you're talking about just jumping onto someone else's podcast. Mate, this is not my podcast. This is a podcast to whoever's out there checking it out and listening. And I'm not normally doing this podcast by myself, and it's a little bit daunting, to be honest, even though I started it. I'm much more comfortable with having a couple of people around us. But, mate, I'm open to talk about whatever it is. Good to have you on board. This one guy also, hello, kind of stream snipping, but hello, mate. You're most welcome to join in. Tell us your story. One thing I'd love to know, which I love talking to people about, is where they are. I'm in a little place called Perth, Western Australia, which is one of the most isolated cities in the world. It also happens to be one of the best, and at the moment it's one of the hottest. It's around about 40 degrees, that's Celsius today, temperature-wise, and you go outside now and it's just like an oven walking out into an incredibly hot night feeling. It's like being in Bali, if you've ever been there, or anywhere in the tropical zone. It's what it's like when you walk outside this time of night, which is about nearly almost 10 o'clock on Wednesday, 11th of December. So where are you? Where are you talking from? Where are you situated in the world? If you want to talk about beliefs, atheism, God, whatever, just fun discussions and chats. I've got a nice glass of red wine. Everyone's gone to bed. The other guys had to all leave early tonight. And so it's just me. So if anyone wants to have a chat, that would be fabulous. If you don't, I guess I'll wrap it up and go to bed. Don't really feel like going to bed. I've got a big day tomorrow. I'm going to be, one of the things I do as an not ex-musician, ex-professional musician, as it were, although as it turns out now I'm back getting paid to. I work in aged care facilities. Lovely old people who just, don't have an awful lot going for them. And it's only for an hour. I go in and sing their favourite songs. And tomorrow it's Christmas, so we're singing Christmas songs and a bunch of other songs that aren't necessarily Christmas songs. I'm really looking forward to it. It's an hour. They love listening. It's not a concert. It's just me trying to make them feel better about their lives and how and why they're in a aged care facility. It's not glamour by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just going to sing some songs. It's just an hour. I do that reasonably regularly. I've got about 10 or 15 bookings for next year. There's a place in Perth called Amana Living, and it's an aged care facility, and they have around about 11 or 12, a couple in the country as well, who just want to be entertained. And having been a professional musician for a long time, to grabbing the old acoustic guitar with a little harmonizer and singing songs tomorrow to them, like Silent Night and Jingle Bells and Feliz Navidad and a whole bunch of other ones. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. It's lovely to see the smile on the faces of the people, and you know, there's people who have Alzheimer's, and it must be an unusual experience for them, but it's what I do. I'm looking forward to it. So that's happening tomorrow. As I said, for an hour. So my voice is a little bit croaky because I've been singing a lot today. I'm just going to top up my glass of medicinal red wine here because I need to lubricate my voice. You don't want to use water for that, so cheers. I'll have a glass of red. Can't believe I'm doing this by myself. So if you're out there, please keep me company. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off and disappear and go to bed. But would love to hear from you if you're watching on YouTube live. We do this, by the way, if you've just joined us, like this one guy who has joined us, who doesn't want to tell me where he's from. That's okay. Don't have to do that. A little stream snipping. So we do this every Wednesday night from just after 8 o'clock Australian Western Standard Time. So wherever you are in the world, it is 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 11th December, right here in Perth, Western Australia. And we have a bunch of people, and we just talk about belief in anything. If you go back and have a look, actually, it's our anniversary. We've been going for 12 months, and some of the subjects, you know, do dogs go to heaven? What would an alien thought if came down and viewed our planet? Would they look at it and think, well, clearly it's a planet by and large controlled by a loving God, or would they be quite dismayed by what they witnessed in the amount of starvation and death, particularly with little children around a country which is a planet which is so incredibly dry in some parts and doesn't seem to be a solvable problem. There has been many fundraising, huge worldwide concerts, as you know, with Bob Geldof and the like, raising an enormous amount of money, but seems to have alleviated very little of the pain and suffering in many countries around the world. And that's a shame. It really is an absolute shame. The amount of wealth on this planet, I mean, Elon Musk, Bezos, these people have got more money than they could ever possibly spend. And to be honest, if I had that kind of money, I would be able to just do so much. I would just want to spend as much as I possibly could to just alleviate some of the suffering around the world. It is, well, I read this thing today, great analogy, that I think it was if a monkey had the ability to store heaps of bananas for itself and ignored everyone else, scientists would want to find out why that monkey would be doing that, storing all of these bananas to himself and not giving any out. And yet when a human does it, they're on the cover of Forbes magazine. I think that is a brilliant analogy about the difference between people of a generous heart. Most of those people also are extremely rich because they don't give money away. Some do, and I'm not taking money, fame away from those people that do care and do give. But by and large, you know, we could alleviate poverty for most of the world if the rich people just gave to the people who don't have anything. You know, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That's been a theme that I've listened to for most of my life, and it's sad. And I would love to have money. My wife and I talk about it all the time, you know, serious money and what you could do with it. I'm not interested in buying a mansion. I'd like a new AMG Mercedes, that's true. But that's about where it stops. You know, I would just love to have money to be able to do something to make a difference. And I don't know, maybe one day this podcast might grow to the point where we can start having an impact in the world. Certainly a lot of people are enjoying our style. It's not argumentative, it's not ugly, it's not abusive. There are plenty of people around the world who already run shows like that. Matt Dillahunty is one of them. Of course, Matt and I have a lot in common as far as being Christians, and then falling out from that and becoming non-believers. But Matt's a very angry man, doesn't tolerate people who don't agree with him. And I did make contact with him a couple of years ago to try and get him on the show, or try and have a chat with him, and just to join the common ground that we both had. And actually I didn't hear back. And I watched him for a long time until I just could not stand the way he would just abuse people. Zero impatience, zero intolerance, zero patience rather, zero intolerance. Just an angry, abusive man, does nothing for those people who don't want to believe, and just more interested in, you know, his own personal journey. And I was going to say good luck to him, but I really don't care. I think he's a poor representation of someone who has a difference of opinion and belief than others. And I think Lottie has to say, when he first started out, was quite good and clever, and does debates all around the world. But then, to me, he just lost it by his just abusive, unnecessary attitude, just completely arrogant and unnecessary. And yeah, whatever. We don't do that here. We're not about putting people down. Everyone has a view. Everyone has an opinion. None of us have got the answers. We ask questions. We talk about belief. We help each other out. It's very encouraging sitting down with two Christians who aren't your very stereotypical Christians. They're very broad when it comes to their belief. And being a part of that on this podcast has been enlightening. It, as I mentioned before, it shows what we have in common more than what we don't. You know, the person who doesn't believe is not necessarily in many ways the complete opposite to someone who does believe. There are many, many things along the way that cross over. They go, oh yeah, I believe in that. And it's been fascinating talking to these guys for the last year. I've changed my view on a lot of stuff. So have they, Luke and Rich. It's been fantastic. It's good. It's wholesome. And don't get me wrong. I mean, if someone's talking shit about faith and whatever, I'm there. I'm there to defend the claim. If you're going to talk about a book which is full of claims and a belief that is full of claims, I want evidence. I'm not interested in your claim. Your claims are worth nothing. The whole world is based upon false claims and people claiming this and claiming that. How many shows have you seen about ghosts? Been watching this stuff for 20, 30 years about, people going ghost hunting. Not once, ever, have I seen any evidence of ghosts. They'll go to a scary old house, which of course is going to be, it's old and creaky, and they'll be there with all their infrared stuff and all these incredible cameras, and they'll hear a noise. You go, what was that? Shh, listen. What was that? It's never anything. Don't get me, again, I'll say, if they could get a camera on a ghost and they could prove that it was a ghost, I'd go, wow, ghosts are real. How cool is that? But it never is. Never, ever, ever has there been any irrefutable proof that there are ghosts. Bring it on if there are. But these shows are just made to suck people into the mystical, the mystery. It's all tied up with the same, stargazing and astronomy and lucky numbers, and we've had people on this podcast all the time talking about stuff like that. And if you would like to talk about that stuff, I am absolutely 100% open. But it looks like that's not going to happen. We're going to wrap it up 10 o'clock now, Wednesday, 11th of December, right here in Perth, Western Australia. We'll be back next Wednesday, which, what would that be? That'd be the 18th, I do believe. Maths have never been my forte. But next Wednesday is the 18th from around about 8 o'clock, Australian Western Standard Time. Wednesday night it will be. Don't have a subject for next Wednesday. If you can think of something, give us a hoy. It's always a bit tricky coming up with a subject that's different because we've covered so many. We've done it, basically had a podcast once a week for a year. Been some breaks. There was a recent break of about 4 weeks. Recently we had some issues, some tragedies in our family and extended family, so we didn't feel like being in a podcast, to be honest, so we chose not to do it. But yeah, basically every Wednesday night you can go into YouTube and check out all of the podcasts that have been over that journey, and there's some really fascinating, interesting stuff in there too with some amazing people, and really enjoyed it. But thanks so much for your company tonight. Hope you can tune in next Wednesday. Thanks to Rich, and not Rich, sorry, Rich is not here. Hopefully he'll be with us next week. Luke and Jace, an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into the bar. That is the podcast. My name is Peter Rowe. It's been fabulous to have your company tonight. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, and hopefully we'll catch you next Wednesday as we head toward Christmas. How exciting. Good night. Thanks so much for your company. Cheers.